if I don't eat, Mom will be less hungry. Right. In the freezing night, that innocent sentence echoed soft as a breath yet piercing straight into the heart of a man who once made an entire city bow. He stood frozen. Not out of fear, but because, for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do in the face of a child's cruel, fragile helplessness. Outside, the wind howled through dark alleys, carrying the scent of poverty and despair. Inside the dim light, a meeting that seemed meaningless began to change everything. No one knew why a cold-blooded mafia boss suddenly stopped. No one understood why his eyes softened, only to become more dangerous than ever. But the most terrifying question is, did that child just save him, or unknowingly drag them both into a horrifying secret with no way back? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. The autumn wind swept through the narrow streets of Chicago's South Side on a crisp October evening in 2025, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and distant lake water. Vincent Russo stepped out of the black SUV that had idled at the curb for only a moment before pulling away without a sound. He was a tall man, fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, with sharp features, softened only by the years that had etched faint lines around his steel-gray eyes. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had long ago learned that power did not need to shout. His dark overcoat, tailored in New York but worn with the casual indifference of a man who owned far more expensive things, hung open against the chill. In his left hand, he held a small paper bag from a corner bakery, fresh pumpkin muffins, the kind his mother used to make every fall when he was a boy. He had bought them on impulse at O'Hare, telling himself it was for nostalgia, though deep down he knew it was an offering, a small apology to the empty house waiting for him. 5 years. 5 long years of building, expanding, negotiating in shadowed rooms from Detroit to Las Vegas, always 1 step ahead of the law, and 2 steps ahead of rivals who wanted his territory. The outfit had changed under his watch, cleaner on paper, more ruthless where it mattered. He had told himself the distance was necessary, that the money flowing back to Chicago would keep the old brick 2-flat safe, the utilities paid the roof solid. He had sent envelopes thick with cash through trusted couriers, instructions always the same: make sure the place stays warm. Buy what you need. Don't tell anyone where it comes from. And every time the reply came back the same: all good here, boss. House is fine. Carla's voice on the burner phone had been smooth, confident, reassuring. She had been his fiancée for 7 years, the woman who understood the life without asking too many questions. Or so he thought. Vinny paused on the cracked sidewalk, looking up at the familiar 2-story building. The red brick still stood proud, though the paint on the window frames had peeled in places, and the small front porch light flickered weakly. From the street it looked unchanged, but something felt wrong. The curtains in the front window were drawn tight, not the way his mother had liked them, half open to let in the morning light. He felt a tug in his chest, a quiet gnawing that had grown sharper over the months since the last call. Guilt. It lived in him like an old wound that never quite healed, flaring whenever he remembered the promises he had made to himself as a teenager. Get out, make it big, come back, and take care of the people who mattered. Instead, he had built an empire on fear and favors, and the people who mattered had been left waiting. He climbed the 3 concrete steps, key already in hand. The lock turned smoothly, too smoothly, as if it had been oiled recently. Inside, the hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and something sweeter, expensive perfume that did not belong to anyone he remembered. The old hardwood floors gleamed under new polish. A crystal chandelier he did not recognize hung above the staircase, catching the dim glow from a lamp on the entry table. The walls, once bare except for faded family photos in dollar store frames, now held abstract art prints in gold frames. The living room furniture was leather, deep burgundy, the kind that cost more than most people on this block earned in a year. Vinny stood motionless, the bakery bag dangling forgotten from his fingers. Carla. His voice carried low, controlled, but it echoed in the too-quiet house. Footsteps clicked from the kitchen, high heels on tile. Carla appeared in the doorway, blonde hair swept back, wearing a silk blouse and tailored slacks that looked fresh from a Michigan Avenue boutique. Her smile faltered for half a second when she saw him, then widened, practiced, and bright. Vinny. You're home. She moved toward him, arms open, but stopped when he did not move to meet her. You should have called. I would have had dinner ready. He set the bag on the entry table. Where is she? Carla's smile held. Who? The woman who was staying here? Maria. The one I asked you to let use the spare room. The one who kept the place from falling apart while I was gone. Carla tilted, her head expression shifting to mild confusion. Oh, her. Maria Gonzalez. She left a while back. Said she wanted something smaller, closer to her church. I didn't argue. She seemed insistent. Vinny's jaw tightened. He walked past her into the living room. The couch cushions were plump, unused. No worn spots from someone sitting there night after night. No blanket folded on the armrest. No coffee mug on the side table. He opened the door to the downstairs bedroom, the one he had insisted Maria take because it had its own bathroom and a window that caught the morning sun. The bed was made with hotel precision, white linens crisp. The closet was empty except for a few hangers. A faint scent of dust lingered, as if no one had breathed in here for months. He turned back to Carla. How long? She crossed her arms. A couple of years, maybe 3. She was fine when she left. I gave her some money from the account you sent. She didn't want to stay. Vinny felt the old anger rise slow and cold. Not the hot flash he used on the street when someone crossed him, but something deeper, heavier. Remorse twisted in his gut like a knife. He had trusted Carla with the one thing. He could not replace someone who had needed protection, someone who had trusted him in return. Maria had been kind to him once, years ago, when he was still figuring out how to survive. She had fed him when his mother was working double shifts, let him sit in her tiny apartment and do homework while she hummed old Motown songs. When his mother passed, Maria had been there at the funeral, quiet, steady. He had offered her the room because he owed her, because he could not be here himself. And now, she was gone. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the last text from one of his runners who sometimes checked on the house. Everything quiet. Lights on every night. That had been 6 months ago. 6 months of lies. Carla stepped closer. Vinny, you're tired. You've been on planes all day. Let me get you a drink. We can talk tomorrow. He looked at her, really looked. The manicured nails, the diamond studs, the faint line of tension around her mouth. Something cold settled in his chest. I'm going to find her. Carla's eyes widened. It's late. The neighborhood isn't safe after dark. You know how it is. I know exactly how it is. He moved toward the door. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the porch light. He paused on the steps, breathing in the sharp October air. Across the street, an old man walked a small dog, head down against the cold. A car idled 2 blocks away, headlights off. Vinny's instincts flared too, still too deliberate. He slipped his hand inside his coat, fingers brushing the concealed holster. Not tonight. Not yet. He walked toward the corner Catholic church, where Maria used to light candles every Sunday. The steeple rose against the darkening sky, illuminated by a single floodlight. Inside, the doors were unlocked. A faint smell of incense and wax greeted him. An elderly priest was extinguishing candles near the altar. Father O'Malley. The priest turned, squinting. Recognition dawned slowly. Vincent Russo. It's been years. Vinny nodded. I'm looking for Maria Gonzalez. She used to come here. The priest's face softened with sadness. She still does when she can, but she's not well. Lives in a shed behind the old vacant lot on 63rd. Barely a roof over her head. The ladies from the parish bring her food when we can, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. It's no way for anyone to live. Vinny felt the floor shift beneath him. A shed. No heat. No running water. While he sent thousands every month. While this house sat warm and empty. He thanked the priest and stepped back into the night. The wind bit harder now, carrying the distant sound of sirens. He walked faster, mind racing. Guilt clawed at him, vicious, unrelenting. He had failed her. Failed the one person who had never asked for anything except to be allowed to stay. And somewhere in that failure a deeper fear stirred. What if it was too late? Behind him, the idling car started its engine. Headlights flicked on. Vinny did not look back. He kept walking, each step heavier than the last, toward the edge of the neighborhood where the streetlights grew sparse and the shadows deeper. Toward whatever remained of the woman he had promised to protect. Toward the truth he could no longer avoid. Vincent Russo moved through the darkened streets of the South Side like a shadow that belonged there. The October night in 2025 had turned bitter, the wind slicing between the gaps in boarded-up storefronts and rattling chain-link fences. Streetlights flickered or were missing entirely. Pools of darkness swallowed the cracked sidewalks. He walked with purpose, hands deep in the pockets of his overcoat, but inside his chest a storm raged, remorse so sharp it felt like broken glass shifting with every breath. He had sent money, thousands upon thousands of dollars every month without fail. Cash dropped off by men who owed him favors, wired through accounts that left no trail. Enough to keep the heat on the fridge, full the roof from leaking. Enough to make sure no one he cared about ever had to sleep on concrete again. And yet here he was, walking toward a shed behind a vacant lot on 63rd. because the priest's quiet words had torn open something inside him that had been bleeding for years. He passed a group of teenagers huddled around a small fire in a metal drum. They looked up, eyes narrowing, recognizing the walk, the coat, the quiet danger that surrounded him. One of them stepped forward, bold, young, stupid. "Yo, you lost." Mr. Vinny did not slow. "I know exactly where I'm going." The kid laughed, nervous. "This ain't your neighborhood no more, man. You look like you belong up north. Maybe you should turn around." Vinny stopped, then turned slowly. The firelight caught the hard planes of his face. "I grew up 3 blocks from here. I still own half the corners you're standing on. Walk away." The kid hesitated, glanced at his friends, then backed off. They melted into the shadows. Vinny kept moving the encounter, only feeding the fury that coiled tighter in his gut. Not at the boys, they were just kids trying to survive the same streets he once had. No, the fury was for himself, for the choices that had taken him away, for the trust he had placed in the wrong hands. The vacant lot appeared ahead, weeds tall enough to hide a man, broken bottles glinting under the moon, the skeleton of an old factory looming behind a sagging fence. He found the narrow path the priest had described, pushed through overgrown brush that caught at his coat like fingers trying to hold him back. And there it was, a shed. Not even a proper shed, more like a lean-to someone had patched together from scavenged plywood, corrugated metal, and blue tarps held down with cinder blocks. The roof sloped unevenly. Rainwater had stained dark streaks down the sides. A single piece of heavy plastic served as a door, flapping weakly in the wind. A thin trail of smoke rose from a small hole cut in the roof. Someone had rigged a makeshift stove inside. Vinny stood frozen, staring. His breath came shallow. This could not be real. This could not be where Maria had ended up. He stepped closer. The plastic rustled as he lifted it aside. Inside was dim, lit only by the faint orange glow of embers in a metal can. The floor was dirt packed hard, covered in places by flattened cardboard boxes and a single threadbare blanket. A plastic bucket sat in one corner, probably for water, probably for everything else. Against the far wall, on a pallet made of broken shipping crates, lay Maria Gonzalez. She was curled on her side, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold in whatever warmth remained. Her dark hair, once thick and shining, hung in thin, matted strands across a face that looked 20 years older than he remembered. Her cheeks were hollow skin stretched tight over bone. The coat she wore, faded denim patched in several places, was far too thin for the cold that seeped through every crack. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. She looked like someone who had not slept more than a few stolen hours in weeks. Vinny's knees nearly buckled. The sight hit him like a physical blow. Remorse surged so violently he had to brace one hand against the rough wall. This was his fault. Every night she had spent shivering here, every meal she had gone without, every moment of humiliation and despair, he had paid for none of it. He had paid for crystal chandeliers and leather couches instead. Maria stirred at the sound of his shoes on the dirt. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, exhausted, wary. For a long moment she simply stared, as if trying to decide whether he was real or another cruel dream. "Vincent," her voice was barely a whisper, cracked from disuse and cold. She pushed herself up slowly, wincing as her thin arms trembled under the effort. "Is that you?" He could not speak at first. The words lodged in his throat like broken concrete. When he finally managed to answer, his voice came out rough, almost unrecognizable. "Maria. God. What happened?" She looked down at her hands, knuckles swollen, nails bitten to the quick, then back at him. Confusion flickered across her face, followed quickly by fear. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe," Carla said. Carla lied. The words came out sharper than he intended. He softened them immediately. "She told me you left on your own. Said you wanted something smaller. I believed her. I believed her for years." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "She told me if I stayed, she'd tell you I was stealing. Said you'd believe her. Said you hadn't seen me in so long you wouldn't know the difference." Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want you to think I was ungrateful." Vinny felt something inside him crack wide open, guilt so deep it burned. He knelt slowly in front of her, careful not to startle her. Up close, the extent of her suffering was unbearable. The way her coat hung off shoulders that had once been strong, the faint tremor in her fingers, the way she kept her gaze lowered, as if ashamed to be seen like this. "You have nothing to be grateful for," he said quietly. "I built that house for people like you, for people who never asked for anything. And I let it become a place that hurt you." Maria shook her head. "You didn't know. I should have known." His voice cracked on the last word. "I should have come back sooner. I should have checked. I had the money, the men, the power, and I let you end up here." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the tarp. Inside, the embers popped softly. Maria's breathing grew uneven. She pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to steady her heart. I tried to make it work, she whispered. I cleaned houses when I could. I sold what little I had. But the cold gets inside you. Nights, when the wind comes through the cracks, you just curl up and wait for morning. Sometimes morning doesn't feel like it's coming. Vinny reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold, fragile as dry leaves. The contact sent a jolt through him, fierce protectiveness, overwhelming sorrow, and something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to love, born of guilt and responsibility. Not romantic, never that, but the fierce, burning need to shield her from any more harm, to make right what he had allowed to go wrong. You're not staying here another night, he said. The words were quiet but absolute. Maria's eyes widened. Fear flashed again, fear of hope, fear of trusting. Vincent, I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. His grip tightened, slightly careful, reassuring. You never were. From the shadows near the doorway, a small sound, a soft gasp. Vinny turned sharply. 2 children stood just inside the plastic flap. A girl, maybe 9, with wide brown eyes and hair pulled back in a fraying ponytail. Beside her, a boy, a year or 2 older, arms crossed, danced protective. Both of them looked half-starved clothes, 2 big shoes worn through at the toes. Maria's face crumpled. Lily. Jamal. Go back to the corner. It's okay. The girl, Lily, stepped forward instead. Her voice was small but steady. We heard voices. We were scared. Vinny looked at them, then back at Maria. Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. She had not been alone here. She had been protecting children. His children, no, not biologically, but in every way that mattered she had taken them in when no one else would. The boy Jamal glared at Vinny. Who are you? You here to hurt her? Vinny met the boy's eyes. No, I'm here to take her somewhere safe. Jamal snorted. Safe, like where you look like trouble. Vinny almost smiled, bitter, tired. I am trouble. But not for her. Maria reached out a trembling hand toward the children. They're good kids. They've been helping me, bringing me bits of food from the church pantry. I couldn't leave them out there alone. Vinny felt the storm inside him shift, remorse, giving way to something harder, more determined. He stood slowly. All 3 of you. Pack what you can carry. We're leaving. Now. Maria looked up at him, eyes searching his face. Shock, confusion, a flicker of desperate hope. Vincent, why, because I should have done this years ago, he said simply, and because no one I care about is ever sleeping on dirt again. Outside, distant tires crunched on gravel. Headlights swept across the lot, slow, deliberate. Vinny's instincts flared. He moved to the doorway, hand slipping inside his coat. Stay here, he told Maria quietly. Don't move. He stepped out into the night. 2 men waited near a dark sedan, silhouettes tense. One of them called out, voice carrying on the wind. Russo, you're in the wrong place. Vinny's answer was calm, lethal. I'm exactly where I need to be. The men exchanged glances. One reached for something at his waist. Vinny's voice dropped lower. Walk away. Last chance. A long beat of silence. Then the men backed off, retreating to their car. Engine roared. Taillights disappeared into the dark. Vinny returned to the shed. Maria was on her feet now, swaying slightly, one arm around each child. Her face was pale, eyes huge with fear and something else, something fragile and luminous. Hope. He extended his hand. Come on, let's go home. She hesitated only a moment. Then, with a soft, trembling breath, she placed her cold fingers in his. The touch felt like absolution, and like the beginning of something he could never undo. The black SUV waited at the edge of the vacant lot, like a patient animal engine idling so low it was almost silent. Vincent Russo guided Maria Gonzalez toward it with one steady arm around her waist, careful, almost reverent, as though she might shatter if he pressed too hard. She weighed almost nothing. The feel of her ribs beneath the thin denim coat sent fresh waves of nausea through him. Behind them, Lily and Jamal followed in small, uncertain steps, clutching plastic grocery bags that held their entire world. A few changes of clothes, a cracked plastic comb, a dog-eared library book, and a small stuffed bear missing one. Maria stumbled once on the uneven ground. Vinny caught her instantly, his grip firm yet gentle. She froze under his touch, body rigid with old habits of self-protection, then slowly, very slowly relaxed against him. Her breathing hitched. He could feel the tremor running through her, not just from cold, but from something deeper, the terror of daring to hope. Easy, he murmured. I've got you. She looked up at him, then eyes wide, and searching in the dim glow of the distant street lamp. Vincent, this car. This is yours. He nodded once. One of them. The driver, a quiet man named Tony, who had worked for Vinny since they were teenagers, opened the rear door without a word. Warm air spilled out, carrying the faint scent of leather and new car freshness. Maria hesitated at the threshold, staring into the interior as though it were another world entirely. Heat, soft seats, no wind cutting through cracks, no dirt floor. Lily tugged at her sleeve. "It's okay, Miss Maria. It looks warm." Jamal crossed his arms tighter, eyes darting from the car to Vinny's face. "We going somewhere good?" Vinny met the boy's stare. "Somewhere safe. That's all I can promise tonight." Maria took a shaky breath, then stepped inside. The children followed. Vinny slid in last, closing the door with a soft, expensive click that felt louder than any gunshot he had ever heard. The SUV pulled away smoothly. Inside, the heater hummed. Maria sat rigid at first, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor mat as though afraid to touch anything. Slowly, her shoulders began to drop. She lifted one hand, fingertips brushing the soft leather seat beside her. A small, involuntary sound escaped her, a half-sob, half-sigh. Vinny watched her in silence. Remorse clawed at him with fresh ferocity. He had spent years surrounded by luxury, private jets, waterfront condos, watches that cost more than most people's homes. While this woman, this good woman who had once fed him leftovers when his mother worked late, had been sleeping on cardboard rationing, the last scraps of dignity. The contrast felt obscene, criminal. And the worst part was knowing he had enabled it. Maria's voice came soft, almost lost in the hum of the engine. I never thought anyone would come for me." Vinny's throat tightened. "I should have come sooner." She shook her head slowly. "You were building something. You had to." "I had choices," he said quietly. "I made the wrong ones." A long silence followed. Outside, Chicago slipped past in smears of sodium light and shadow. Maria's gaze drifted to the children. Lily had already curled against her side, eyes heavy. Jamal sat stiffly on the opposite seat, watching Vinny like a hawk, waiting for the first wrong move. Maria spoke again, voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." Vinny turned toward her fully. "I'm listening." She swallowed hard, her fingers twisted together until the knuckles went white. "Lily, she's yours. Your daughter." The words landed like a slow-motion explosion. Vinny felt the air leave his lungs. For several heartbeats, nothing existed except the roar in his ears and the sudden violent stillness in his chest. Lily, his daughter. He looked at the girl, really looked. The shape of her eyes, the slight upward tilt at the corners when she smiled faintly in her half-sleep. The stubborn set of her small jaw, pieces he had never allowed himself to notice before, clicked into place with brutal clarity. Maria's voice cracked. "It was one summer, before everything changed for you, before the life took over. I didn't know how to find you after you left the neighborhood, and when I realized, I didn't want to pull you back into something small and ordinary. You were meant for bigger things. I thought keeping her a secret was protecting you both." Vinny's hands clenched on his knees. Guilt surged so violently he tasted copper. All the years he had spent hardening himself, telling himself family was a liability, that attachments were weaknesses rivals could exploit. And here was proof, living, breathing proof, that he had a child. A daughter who had grown up hungry, cold, afraid, while he built walls of money and power around himself. He looked at Lily again. She stirred, blinking sleepily. "Miss Maria, are we there yet?" Maria smoothed the girl's hair with a trembling hand. "Soon, sweetheart." Vinny's voice came out hoarse. "Does she know?" Maria shook her head. "I told her daddy was working far away, that he loved her even if he couldn't be here. I never wanted her to feel abandoned." Jamal snorted softly. "Yeah, well, lots of dads work far away and never come back." Vinny met the boy's eyes. "I didn't know she existed. If I had," Jamal looked away. "Doesn't matter now." But it did. It mattered more than anything Vinny had ever done or failed to do. The SUV slowed as they approached a quiet street lined with modest but well-kept houses. Tony pulled into the driveway of a 2-story colonial, nothing ostentatious from the outside, but the kind of place that had security cameras discreetly placed and reinforced doors. Vinny had bought it years ago as a safe house. Now it felt like the only sanctuary he could offer. He helped Maria out first. She swayed on her feet. He caught her elbow again. This time she did not flinch. Instead, she leaned into him slightly, just enough to accept the support. Inside the house smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen. Warm lamplight spilled from the living room. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Maria stopped in the foyer, staring at the polished hardwood, the soft rugs, the framed prints on the walls. Tears welled up and spilled over before she could stop them. "I haven't been in a real house in so long," she whispered. Vinny felt something inside him tear wider. "You're home now." He led them to the kitchen. The refrigerator was stocked fresh fruit, milk, bread, cheese, cold cuts. He pulled out a carton of orange juice, poured 4 glasses. Maria's hand shook so badly she nearly dropped hers. Lily drank hers in 3 big gulps, eyes wide with wonder. Jamal sipped slowly, still watching. Vinny knelt in front of Lily. "Hey, you okay?" She studied him with those 2 old eyes. "You're really my dad?" The question hit like a fist to the sternum. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am." Lily considered this. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around his neck in a sudden, fierce hug. Vinny froze, arms hovering, then slowly, carefully folded them around her. She smelled like cold air and faint soap and childhood. Something hot and painful burned behind his eyes. Maria watched tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Jamal looked away, throat working. Vinny held Lily a long moment, then gently eased back. "I'm going to take care of you. All of you. I swear it." Maria's voice was barely audible. "Vincent, you don't have to, I do." The words came out fierce, almost angry at himself, at the years lost, at the cruelty that had let this happen. "I have more money than I'll ever need. Houses, cars, people who answer when I call. And I let you live like that. I let my own daughter." His voice broke. He dragged in a breath. "Never again." Maria reached out, touched his arm. Her fingers were still cold, but the gesture was warm. "You're here now." He covered her hand with his. The contact sent another jolt through him, protectiveness so intense it bordered on pain. Not romantic love. Never that. But a fierce, consuming paternal devotion that had ignited the instant he heard the truth, burning away layers of cynicism and detachment he had worn like armor for years. Outside, tires crunched on the street, slow, deliberate. Vinny tensed. He rose, moved to the window. A dark sedan idled across the road, headlights off. Too long to be casual. He turned back to Maria and the children. "Stay inside. Lock the doors behind me." Maria's face paled. "Vincent, I'll be right back." He stepped out into the night. The wind had picked up again, carrying the faint smell of lake water and diesel. The sedan's driver door opened. A man stepped out, mid-30s, leather jacket, confident stride. "Russo," he called. "Word travels fast. You're back in town picking up strays." Vinny's voice was ice. "Walk away, Nikki. This doesn't concern you." Nikki smirked. "Everything concerns us when it's in our territory. You bringing charity cases into safe houses makes people nervous." Vinny stepped closer. "You tell your boss if anyone touches them, I'll burn every corner he owns." Nikki raised both hands. "Just passing on the message." He backed to the car, slid inside. Engine revved. Taillights disappeared. Vinny stood in the driveway until the sound faded completely. Then he returned to the house. Maria waited just inside the door, arms wrapped around herself. Lily clung to her leg. Jamal stood a step behind, fists clenched. Vinny closed the door softly. "They're gone." Maria exhaled shakily. "They'll come back, maybe," he said, "but they won't get through me." He looked at the 3 of them, thin, exhausted, afraid, and felt the last of his old defenses crumble. This was his family now. His responsibility, his redemption, and nothing, not money, not power, not threats from old enemies would take them from him again. The colonial house on the quiet street held its breath in the small hours of that October morning in 2025. Warm lamplight pooled on the hardwood floors, softening the edges of furniture that had rarely been used. In the spacious kitchen, Vincent Russo stood at the island counter sleeves, rolled to his elbows, carefully slicing apples with a knife that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. The blade moved with practiced precision, each piece thin, and even arranged on a white plate beside a small bowl of peanut butter. Simple food, comfort food, the kind of meal that did not demand gratitude but quietly invited it. Maria Gonzalez sat at the breakfast table in one of the oversized flannel shirts Vinny had pulled from a guest room closet. The sleeves swallowed her hands. The fabric hung loose across her narrow shoulders. She had showered slowly, hesitantly, under hot water that never ran cold, using soap that smelled faintly of lavender instead of the sharp institutional bars she had known for years. Her hair, still damp, clung to her temples in dark strands. She looked cleaner but no less fragile. Every few minutes her gaze drifted to the windows, as though expecting the night to reach in and pull her back to the shed. Lily sat beside her knees, drawn up on the chair, small fingers tracing patterns on the polished wood. Jamal perched across from them, elbows on the table, chin in his hands, watching Vinny with the wary stillness of a street cat deciding whether to flee or fight. Vinny set the plate in front of Lily first. "Try this. It's just apples and peanut butter. Nothing fancy." Lily's eyes widened. She reached for a slice, dipped it carefully, and took a bite. The crunch was loud in the quiet room. Her face lit up pure, unguarded delight. "It's sweet," she whispered, as though sweetness were a secret she had almost forgotten. Vinny's chest tightened. He turned away for a moment, pretending to adjust the knife on the cutting board. The sight of her, his daughter, eating something as ordinary as an apple with such reverence tore at him. How many nights had she gone to bed with an empty stomach while he sat in restaurants where the bill alone could have fed a family for weeks? The remorse was no longer a gnawing ache. It had become a living thing inside him, clawing upward, demanding atonement. He placed a similar plate in front of Jamal. The boy stared at it for a long beat before taking a slice. He ate slowly, methodically, never taking his eyes off Vinny. Maria accepted her plate with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said softly, the words so quiet they might have been lost if the room had not been so still. She took one small bite, chewed carefully, then set the slice down as though afraid to take more. "I'm not used to this much." Vinny sat across from her. "Eat what you can. There's more. There will always be more." She nodded, but her eyes filled again. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold the tears back. "I keep thinking this is a dream, that I'll wake up and the wind will be blowing through the cracks again. The cold gets inside you after a while. You stop feeling your toes. You stop feeling much of anything." Vinny's hands clenched beneath the table. He wanted to reach across to take her cold fingers in his, to promise her warmth for the rest of her life. But he held back. She needed time. They all did. Lily finished her apple slices and looked up at Vinny. "You have a scar on your hand." He glanced down. An old knife wound ran across the back of his right hand, a pale, jagged line from a night 20 years earlier, when a deal had gone bad. He had almost forgotten it was there. Lily reached out hesitant, then gently touched the scar with one fingertip. "Does it hurt?" Vinny swallowed. "Not anymore." She looked at him with those two serious eyes. "It doesn't have to hurt forever. Miss Maria says scars are just stories that stopped bleeding." Vinny felt something crack inside him, something he had kept locked away for so long he had forgotten it could break. He covered her small hand with his own. "You're right," he said hoarsely. "They don't have to hurt forever." Maria watched the exchange, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away this time. She simply let them fall. Jamal pushed his plate aside. "Why are you doing this?" His voice was low-edged with suspicion. "You don't know us. You show up out of nowhere with a big car and a big house and food like it's nothing. Guys like you don't do nice things for free." Vinny met the boy's gaze. "You're right. I don't." Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Then what do you want?" Vinny leaned forward slightly. "Nothing from you. Nothing from any of you. I want to fix what I broke. That's all." Jamal snorted. "You can't fix years of cold nights and empty stomachs with apples." The words landed like a slap. Vinny did not flinch. "No," he agreed quietly. "I can't. But I can make sure there are no more of those nights. Not for any of you." Silence settled over the table, heavy, thick with unspoken pain. Maria spoke, then voice soft and trembling. "Jamal, he's trying." Jamal looked at her, then back at Vinny. "Trying isn't enough if it stops tomorrow." Vinny nodded slowly. "It won't stop tomorrow. Or the day after. Or any day after that." Lily slid off her chair and walked around the table to Vinny. Without warning, she climbed onto his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck again. Vinny froze, arms hovering, then slowly encircled her with careful strength. She rested her cheek against his shoulder. "I believe you," she whispered. The simple declaration nearly undid him. He closed his eyes, breathing in the clean scent of her damp hair. Love, fierce, protective, paternal, surged through him with such force it left him dizzy. This child, his child, had grown up believing her father was a distant shadow, had survived hunger and cold and fear, and now she sat in his lap trusting him. Maria reached across the table and touched his arm. "Vincent." He opened his eyes. Tears stood in hers, tears of exhaustion, relief, fragile hope. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing us." Vinny covered her hand with his free one. "I should have seen you sooner." Outside, the first gray light of dawn crept across the lawn. A car engine started somewhere down the block, too deliberate, too slow. Vinny tensed. He lifted Lily gently from his lap and set her on her feet. "Stay here with Maria," he said quietly. "I'll be right back." Jamal stood. "I'm coming with you." Vinny looked at him, really looked. Saw the fear beneath the bravado. "All right. But you stay behind me." They stepped onto the porch. The street was quiet, except for that single idling engine. A black sedan sat at the curb 2 houses down. The driver's window rolled down. A voice called out, calm, almost amused. "Morning, Russo. Nice family you got there." Vinny stepped to the railing. "You got a message, deliver it and go." The man in the car chuckled. "Just checking in. Word spreading. The boss wants to know if you're going soft. Taking in strays doesn't look good." Vinny's voice dropped to a lethal calm. "Tell your boss if anyone comes near this house, I'll make sure every business he touches turns to ash." You understand me, the man raised both hands in mock surrender. Loud and clear, the window rolled up. The car pulled away slowly. Vinny exhaled, shoulders tight. Jamal stood beside him, fists clenched. They'll keep coming, the boy said quietly. Vinny nodded. They will. Jamal looked up at him. You gonna keep us anyway? Vinny turned to face him fully. Yes. Jamal searched his face for a long moment. Then almost imperceptibly he nodded. Back inside, Maria had pulled both children close. She looked up as Vinny and Jamal returned. Her eyes were red-rimmed but steady. Vinny knelt in front of her. We're safe. For now. She reached out, cupped his face with both hands, cold fingers warming against his skin. You don't have to fight for us. He covered her hands with his own. I do. Because you fought for them. For years. Alone. Maria's breath hitched. I just wanted them to have a chance. Vinny's voice cracked. They will. I swear it. Lily leaned against Maria's shoulder, watching them. You're staying right. You're not going away again. Vinny looked at his daughter, and felt the last remnants of his old life fracture and fall away. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not ever again. Outside the dawn, light strengthened, turning the world gold and soft. Inside the house, 4 people sat in quiet stillness, thin, wounded, hopeful, beginning slowly to believe that warmth could last. And Vincent Russo, once a man who measured worth in territory and fear, felt his heart tear open wider than ever before. Not with pain alone, but with the fierce, burning need to protect what mattered most, to protect his family. The days that followed blurred into a fragile rhythm inside the quiet colonial house on the tree-lined street. October in 2025 continued its slow march toward winter. Leaves turned brilliant, shades of crimson and gold outside the tall windows, while inside the air stayed warm and steady, scented faintly with cinnamon from the candles Vinny had lit each evening. The furnace hummed softly in the basement, a constant reminder that no one here would ever shiver again. Maria Gonzalez moved through the rooms like someone learning to walk on new ground. She touched surfaces tentatively, granite countertops, velvet throw pillows, the smooth brass doorknobs as though afraid they might disappear if she claimed them too boldly. Her body still carried the marks of long hunger, wrists so thin the bones stood out sharply, collarbones that looked carved rather than grown, eyes that sometimes lost focus when fatigue crashed over her without warning. She slept in the guest room upstairs now in a bed with clean white sheets that smelled of sunshine instead of damp cardboard. Yet every morning she woke with a start heart racing, convinced for a split second that the wind was still howling through cracks and that the children were still curled beside her on a pallet of broken crates. Vinny watched her from doorways from across rooms, never crowding but never far. Each small sign of recovery, color returning to her cheeks, the way her shoulders no longer hunched quite so defensively, felt like a personal absolution he did not deserve. Remorse lived in him constantly now, a deep grinding ache that flared brightest when he saw her pause in front of the refrigerator, staring at shelves crowded with food, as though she could not quite believe they were real. One afternoon, Maria stood in the kitchen alone. She opened the door, let the cool air wash over her face, then closed it again. Opened it. Closed it. The motion was small, mechanical, almost childlike. Vinny stepped in quietly from the hallway. Everything all right? She startled, hand flying to her chest. I keep checking, to make sure it's still full. Vinny crossed the room slowly. It will be. Every day. Maria's eyes filled. I used to count crumbs, she whispered. One slice of bread had to last 3 days sometimes. I'd cut it so thin you could see light through it. And the children? They never complained. They just got quieter. Vinny felt the words like a blade sliding between ribs. He reached past her, pulled out a carton of fresh strawberries, bright red plump, flown in that morning, and set them on the counter. Eat as many as you want, right now. She stared at the berries. Tears slipped free. I forgot what they tasted like. He washed a handful under the faucet, dried them gently with a towel, and placed them in her palm. She lifted one to her lips, bit down. Juice ran down her chin. She laughed, a small broken sound, and wiped it away with the back of her hand. Vinny turned away for a moment, throat working. The sight of her finally tasting something sweet after years of rationing bitterness shattered something inside him all over again. Lily appeared in the doorway, barefoot, wearing one of Vinny's old t-shirts that reached her knees like a dress. Miss Maria, can we go to the park? Jamal wants to show you his throw. Maria looked at Vinny. A question. A plea. He nodded. We'll go. All of us. The park was only 3 blocks away, a wide green space with baseball diamonds, playground equipment, and benches still warm from the afternoon sun. Vinny walked beside Maria, matching her slow pace. Lily skipped ahead, holding Jamal's hand. The boy carried the new baseball glove Vinny had bought him the day before, soft leather, stiff with newness, the kind every Chicago kid dreamed of owning. At the diamond, Jamal tossed the ball lightly to Lily. She caught it awkwardly, giggling. Jamal grinned, rare, fleeting, and threw it back. Vinny watched from the bleachers with Maria. She sat close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Neither moved away. "She's happy," Maria said softly. "I haven't heard her laugh like that in years." Vinny's voice was low. "She deserves it." Maria turned to him. "You gave her the glove. You taught him how to hold it. You didn't have to. I wanted to." He looked at her, then really looked. "I want to give them everything. I never had time to give anyone." Maria's hand rested on the bench between them. Slowly, hesitantly, she covered his fingers with hers. The touch was light, almost weightless, yet it burned through him warmth against the cold guilt that had lived in his bones for so long. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing them. For seeing me." Vinny turned his hand, palm up, let her fingers rest in his. "I should have seen you sooner." She shook her head. "You're here now." In that quiet moment, with children laughing in the distance and leaves drifting across the grass, Vinny felt the last walls he had built around his heart crumble completely, not with noise or drama, with stillness, with the simple, devastating knowledge that this protecting them, loving them, was the only thing that had ever truly mattered. Lily ran over, cheeks flushed. "Dad, can Jamal keep the glove forever?" Vinny looked at the boy waiting by the fence, glove clutched tight. "Yeah," he said. "Forever." Lily beamed, threw her arms around Vinny's neck. He hugged her back, careful, strong, and when she pulled away, she pinned something small and bright to his jacket, lapel, a tiny American flag, pinned the enamel chipped in one corner. "It was my grandpa's," she said solemnly. "He said it means you keep fighting for what's right, even when it's hard." Vinny stared at the pin. His throat closed. "Thank you, sweetheart." He looked at Maria. She smiled, small, tired, luminous. That night, after the children were asleep in their rooms, real beds, real blankets, real safety, Vinny stood on the back porch staring at the dark yard. Maria joined him, wrapped in a thick cardigan he had bought her that afternoon. They stood in silence for a long time. Then she spoke, voice soft. "I was so afraid when you found us. Afraid you'd see how far I'd fallen. How weak I'd become." Vinny turned to her. "You're not weak. You kept them alive. You kept yourself alive. That's strength." Maria's eyes searched his. "And you? What are you afraid of?" The question caught him off guard. He looked away. "That I'll fail you again. That the life I built will reach out and take this away." Maria stepped closer. "Then don't let it." Vinny met her gaze. The protectiveness that had ignited days earlier now burned steady, fierce, unyielding. "I won't." From the street, tires rolled slowly past the house, too slow. Vinny tensed. He moved Maria gently behind him. A car stopped at the curb. Door opened. A man stepped out, different from the others. Older, calm, expensive coat. "Russo," he called. "We need to talk." Vinny's voice carried clear across the lawn. "Not tonight." The man smiled thinly. "Your new priorities are making people nervous. Family makes a man soft. Soft men lose territory." Vinny stepped down from the porch. "You tell whoever sent you that if anyone comes near this house, if anyone even looks at them wrong, I will end every single thing they care about." Slowly. Permanently. The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Message received. He returned to the car. It pulled away. Vinny stood in the driveway until the taillights vanished. When he turned back, Maria waited at the top of the steps, arms wrapped around herself. "They won't stop," she said quietly. Vinny climbed the steps, stopped in front of her. "They can try." Maria reached up, touched his cheek. "Be careful." He covered her hand with his. "I will. For all of you." Inside, the house slept warm, quiet, safe. Outside, shadows lengthened. And Vincent Russo, once a man ruled by power alone, now lived for something far more dangerous, love that could be taken away. He would burn the world before he let that happen. Rain began falling in the late afternoon of that October day in 2025, turning the streets of Chicago into slick black mirrors that reflected the sodium glow of streetlights. Inside the colonial house, the atmosphere had settled into something almost peaceful. Maria Gonzalez sat on the living room sofa, with a soft blanket draped across her lap, reading aloud from a worn paperback Lily had chosen from the bookshelf. The girl lay curled against her, side eyes half closed, listening to the familiar rhythm of Maria's gentle voice. Jamal sat cross-legged on the rug, new baseball glove resting in his lap, turning it over and over as though still convincing himself it was real. Vincent Russo stood at the tall window watching rain streak the glass. He had not slept more than a few hours in days. The weight of protection, of knowing that every shadow outside could carry a threat pressed against his ribs like iron. Yet beneath the vigilance burned something warmer, fiercer, the absolute certainty that these three people were his to shield. No negotiation, no compromise. The love that had taken root the moment he learned Lily was his daughter, the moment he saw Maria's hollowed face in the shed, had grown into something consuming. Not romantic. Never that. It was the fierce, paternal devotion of a man who had spent years running from attachment only to discover it was the only thing worth dying for. Maria glanced up from the book. "Vincent," he turned. "Yeah, you're pacing again." He managed a small, tired smile. "Habit." She closed the book gently. "Come, sit." For a minute. He hesitated, then crossed the room and lowered himself onto the sofa beside her. Lily shifted, nestling closer to Maria, but reaching one small hand to rest on Vinny's knee. The simple contact grounded him. For a moment the room held only the soft patter of rain, the crackle of the fire, and 3 quiet breaths sinking together. Then his phone vibrated on the coffee table, once sharp. He picked it up. A text from Tony, 2 cars circling the block. Same plates as last night. "They're not leaving." Vinny's jaw tightened. He stood. "I need to step out." Maria's face paled. Now better now than later. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the fear flicker in her eyes, the old terror of loss rising again. "Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows. I'll be back before you finish the chapter." Lily sat up. "Dad," he knelt in front of her. "I'm just going to talk to some people. Nothing bad. Promise." She searched his face, then nodded slowly. "Come back quick." Vinny kissed the top of her head, light, brief, but it sent a jolt through him. Then he looked at Maria. "Keep them inside." She nodded, voice barely audible. "Be careful." He stepped into the rain. The street was empty except for the 2 dark sedans idling at opposite ends of the block. Vinny walked toward the nearer, one coat collar turned up, hands loose at his sides. The driver's window rolled down as he approached. A man he recognized, Frankie the Knife Moretti, mid-level player in a rival crew, leaned out slightly. "Russo, you're making waves." Vinny stopped 5 feet away. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat. "You've got 30 seconds to drive away." Frankie smiled thinly. "Boss wants a sit-down. Says you're distracted. Says family makes you sloppy. He wants to know if you're still in the game or if you're playing house now." Vinny's voice was ice. "Tell him I'm out of the parts of the game that touch this street. Tell him if anyone comes near my house again, I'll make sure every dollar he's ever touched turns to dust." Frankie chuckled. Big words. Vinny stepped closer. Last warning. The second car's doors opened. 3 men stepped out, slow, deliberate. One held a phone recording. Another cracked his knuckles. Vinny did not move. "You really want to do this in front of cameras," Frankie shrugged. "Proof you're soft. Proof you won't hit back." Vinny's phone buzzed again. "Tony, they've got eyes on the back alley too." Vinny's heart rate stayed steady, but inside, fury and fear collided in violent waves. Fear not for himself. For them. For Lily's laugh. For Maria's fragile trust. For Jamal's guarded hope. The thought of any of them being dragged back into the cold, the hunger, the humiliation, it tore at him with claws. He spoke low. "Walk away." "Now." Frankie opened his door wider. Or what Vinny moved fast, controlled. He closed the distance, grabbed Frankie's collar through the open window, and yanked him halfway out. The man's feet kicked air. "You touch them," Vinny said, voice lethal calm, "and I end you. Not your crew. Not your business. You. Personally. Slowly." Frankie's smirk vanished. He nodded frantically. Vinny released him. Frankie fell back into the seat, coughing. The other 3 men froze. Vinny turned to them. "Go." They backed away. Doors slammed. Engines roared. Both cars peeled off into the rain. Vinny stood in the street, rain soaking through his coat, breathing hard. Then he turned and jogged back toward the house. He never saw the 3rd car. It came from the cross street, black, no plates, windows tinted. It accelerated hard. Vinny spun at the last second. The impact was glancing enough to spin him, slam him against a parked van. Pain exploded in his side, hot and bright. He hit the pavement hard, rolling once. The car swerved tires, screaming, and vanished around the corner. Vinny pushed himself up on one elbow. Blood soaked his shirt, shallow cut from broken glass, but deep enough. He staggered to his feet, vision swimming. Then he heard the scream. From the house. He ran limping, bleeding up the steps through the door Maria had left unlocked in panic. Inside, chaos. Lily stood frozen in the hallway, eyes wide with terror. Jamal had his arms around her, shielding her. Maria knelt on the floor, hands pressed to her mouth, staring at the shattered front window. Glass glittered on the rug like fallen stars. Vinny staggered forward. "What happened?" Maria's voice shook. "They threw something. A brick. There was a note." Vinny looked. The brick lay in the center of the room, wrapped in paper. He ripped it open. One word scrawled in black markers. Soon, Vinny crumpled the paper in his fist. Rage surged, white-hot blinding, but beneath it terror, pure parental terror. He dropped to his knees beside Lily. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming. "No, but you're bleeding." Vinny looked down. Blood had soaked through his coat, dripping onto the floor. Maria crawled forward, hands shaking. "Vincent." He caught her wrists gently. "I'm fine. Just a scratch." She stared at the wound, then at his face. Tears spilled over. "They're never going to stop." Vinny pulled her close, careful, mindful of the blood. She buried her face in his shoulder, body trembling. Jamal stepped forward, voice small. "They know we're here." Vinny looked at the boy, really looked. Saw the fear beneath the bravado. "They know, and they're going to regret it." He stood slowly, wincing. "Tony's outside. He'll stay. No one gets near this house tonight." Maria clung to him. "Don't go out again. I have to end this." She pulled back, eyes searching his. "Not alone." Vinny cupped her face, gentle, reverent. "I'm not alone anymore." Lily wrapped her arms around his waist. "Don't leave us." Vinny knelt again, gathering both children close. Pain throbbed in his side, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest, the fierce tearing need to keep them safe. "I won't," he whispered. "Never again." Outside, rain hammered the roof. Sirens wailed in the distance. Inside, 4 people held each other in the quiet wreckage of a shattered window, blood on the floor, fear in the air, love burning brighter than any threat. And Vincent Russo understood with devastating clarity that the war had just begun. Not for territory, for family. The emergency room at Street Luke's hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet urgency. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale, steady glow across white walls and linoleum floors that had been mopped so many times they looked almost polished. Vincent Russo sat on the edge of a narrow bed, in a curtained bay shirt, gone torso wrapped in fresh gauze. The shallow gash along his ribs had needed 14 stitches, nothing life-threatening, the doctor had said, but enough to leave him stiff and aching with every breath. He had refused pain medication stronger than ibuprofen. He needed to stay sharp, needed to feel every twinge as a reminder that he had almost let them down again. Outside the curtain, rain still tapped against the windows, persistent, unrelenting, the same rain that had soaked him on the pavement hours earlier. Inside the small space, however, the air felt different. Warmer, thicker, with something unspoken and fragile. Maria Gonzalez sat in the single plastic chair beside the bed, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her thin frame looked even smaller in the oversized hospital gown they had given her when she insisted on staying close. She had not let go of his hand since they arrived, fingers cold at first, then slowly warming against his skin. Lily slept in the chair's companion seat, head resting on Maria's shoulder, small body curled under a thin hospital blanket. Jamal stood near the foot of the bed, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor, but every few minutes he glanced up at Vinny as though checking he was still breathing. Vinny looked at them, really looked, and felt the familiar tear inside his chest widen into something raw and gaping. Guilt had always been with him, a constant companion, but now it had teeth. He had brought danger to their door. He had let the world he built touch the only pure thing left in his life. The image of the brick crashing through the window, of Lily's scream, of Maria's face draining of color, it replayed behind his eyes in merciless detail. Remorse clawed upward, violent and unrelenting, threatening to choke him. Maria's thumb moved in slow circles over the back of his hand. "You're thinking too loud," she whispered. Vinny managed a faint, crooked smile. "Can't help it." She lifted his hand to her lips, soft, brief, almost reverent, and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. The gesture was so simple, so unguarded, that it stole his breath. "You saved us tonight," she said quietly. "Again." "I almost didn't." His voice cracked on the last word. "If that car had been faster, if they'd aimed better." Maria shook her head. "Stop. I can't." He looked at Lily's sleeping face, at Jamal's tense shoulders. "I brought this to you. To them. I should have walked away from that life years ago. Should have stayed gone. Should have." Maria leaned forward, cupping his face with both hands. Her palms were still thin, still fragile, but the strength in her grip surprised him. "You came back," she said. "That's what matters. You came back and you stayed. You didn't run when it got hard. You didn't leave us in the rain again." Vinny closed his eyes. Tears burned behind his lids, tears he had not shed since he was a boy. "I don't deserve this. Any of it." Maria's voice trembled. "None of us thought we deserved anything good. Not after so long in the cold. Not after so many nights wondering if morning would come. But here we are. Warm. Safe. Together." Lily stirred, then blinking sleepily. She looked at Vinny, saw the bandage, the exhaustion carved into his face, and her bottom lip quivered. "You're hurt," she whispered. Vinny reached for her with his free arm. "Just a scratch, sweetheart. I'm okay." She slid off Maria's lap and climbed carefully onto the bed beside him, mindful of the IV line of the gauze. She pressed her small cheek against his shoulder. I was scared, she admitted in a tiny voice. When the glass broke, when you were bleeding outside, Vinny wrapped his good arm around her. I know, I'm sorry. Lily lifted her head. You came back inside. You didn't leave us. Jamal finally moved slow steps until he stood at the bedside. He looked down at Vinny for a long moment, then spoke so quietly the words were almost lost in the hum of the hospital. I thought you'd run, he said. When the brick came through, when they started circling, I thought you'd disappear like everybody else. Vinny met the boy's eyes. I'm not everybody else. Jamal swallowed hard. You took another hit for us. You didn't have to. Vinny's throat closed. Yeah, I did. Jamal's shoulders dropped. He reached out hesitant, almost afraid, and placed one hand on Vinny's forearm. Thanks, he whispered. The single word cracked something wide open inside Vinny. He reached up, covered Jamal's hand with his own. They stayed like that, 4 people connected by touch, by silence, by the shared weight of survival, until a nurse slipped in to check Vinny's vitals. She smiled softly at the scene, adjusted the drip, and left without speaking. When the curtain fell closed again, Maria leaned her forehead against Vinny's temple. I used to dream about this, she murmured. Not the hospital part, just someone staying, someone seeing us and choosing to stay. Vinny turned his head, pressed his lips to her hair. I'm staying. Lily lifted the small stuffed bear she had carried from the shed. Its one eye was still missing, fur worn thin from years of being held too tight. She placed it carefully on Vinny's chest over the bandage. For when it hurts, she said solemnly. He makes things better. Vinny looked down at the bear, then at his daughter. Tears slipped free before he could stop them. Jamal cleared his throat. I'll get ice, he said gruffly, and slipped out through the curtain. Maria watched him go, then turned back to Vinny. He's starting to trust you. It's slow, but it's real. Vinny nodded. I'll wait as long as it takes. Outside the hospital in the covered walkway, Jamal returned with a plastic bag of ice wrapped in a towel. He handed it to Vinny without a word, then sat on the edge of the bed. Vinny pressed the ice to his side. You okay? Jamal shrugged. Better than yesterday. Vinny studied him. You don't have to keep watch alone anymore. Jamal looked away. Habit. I know. Vinny paused. But we're a team now. All 4 of us. Jamal's eyes glistened. He blinked hard, then nodded once. Lily yawned, curling tighter against Vinny. Maria smoothed her hair, humming a soft lullaby, the same one she had sung in the shed on the coldest nights. Vinny listened to the melody, felt the small weight of his daughter against him, the steady pressure of Maria's hand in his, the quiet presence of Jamal at the foot of the bed. And in that small curtained space, surrounded by beeping monitors, antiseptic smell, and the distant murmur of nurses, he felt something shift inside him. Not just healing of the body, healing of the soul. The man who had once measured worth in fear and territory now measured it in the slow, steady breaths of the people he loved, in the way Lily's fingers curled trustingly around his, in the way Jamal's shoulders finally relaxed, in the way Maria looked at him not with suspicion, not with fear, but with something luminous and unbreakable. Vinny closed his eyes. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he allowed himself to believe that redemption was possible. Not through money, not through power, through love that refused to let go. Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside, 4 wounded hearts beat together, quiet, steady healing. The rain had finally stopped by the time Vincent Russo left St. Luke's Hospital just before dawn on that final October morning in 2025. The city smelled clean, wet pavement, distant diesel, the faint metallic tang of lake wind off the water. His ribs ached with every step, the fresh stitches pulling beneath the clean shirt Tony had brought from the house, but Vinny welcomed the pain. It kept him sharp. It kept him present. Maria had wanted to come. She had stood in the hospital doorway, thin arms wrapped around herself, eyes pleading in that quiet, wordless way she had learned over years of asking for nothing. Let me be there, she had whispered. I don't want you to face this alone. Vinny had cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away the tears she tried to hide. You've faced enough alone, he told her. Stay with the kids. Keep the doors locked. I'll come home to you. Lily had clung to his leg, small fingers twisted in the hem of his coat. Promise, he had knelt, kissed her forehead. Promise. Jamal had said nothing, just watched him with those guarded eyes that were beginning slowly to soften. A single nod. That was enough. Now Vinny drove the black SUV through the waking streets, Tony silent in the passenger seat. The old brick 2-flat loomed ahead on its familiar corner, red brick, still proud porch light, still flickering the way it always had. But the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a crime scene he had yet to fully acknowledge. He parked across the street, sat for a long moment, staring at the windows where new curtains, expensive silk, the kind Carla had always preferred, blocked out the morning light. His hands tightened on the wheel until the leather creaked. Tony glanced sideways. You sure you want to do this without backup? Vinny's voice was low. This isn't business. This is personal. He stepped out into the cool air. The street was quiet, except for the distant rumble of an early L train. He crossed the road, climbed the 3 concrete steps he had climbed 1,000 times as a boy, and used his key. The lock turned smoothly, too smoothly oiled, recently maintained with money he had sent. Inside the foyer smelled of expensive candles and Carla's perfume. The chandelier he had never asked for glittered overhead. Leather furniture gleamed in the living room. Everything polished, everything perfect, everything wrong. Carla appeared at the top of the stairs, silk robe tied loosely, blonde hair mussed from sleep or from pretending to sleep. She froze when she saw him. Vinny. Her voice came out small, almost childlike. You're hurt. He did not answer. He walked past the staircase into the kitchen where the granite counters shone under recessed lights. He opened the refrigerator, stocked with imported cheeses, fresh berries, bottles of wine that cost more than Maria had seen in a year. He closed it again. The sound echoed. Carla descended the stairs, slowly, barefoot robe trailing behind her like a ghost. I heard about the brick. The hospital. Are you okay? Vinny turned. Sit. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the leather sofa as though afraid it might reject her. Vinny remained standing. Where is she, Carla? Asked voice trembling. Maria. And the kids. Safe, Vinny said. Away from here. Carla's eyes filled. I didn't know it would go this far. I was scared. You were changing. You were pulling away. I thought if I kept things the way they were, you kept things the way they were by starving her. Vinny's voice stayed even, but the fury beneath it vibrated. By threatening her. By telling her I'd believe you over her. By letting my daughter go hungry while you spent my money on silk robes and crystal. Carla's tears spilled over. I was jealous. She had you in a way I never did. She had your history, your loyalty. You wanted the money. Vinny stepped closer. You wanted the status. You wanted the house. You never wanted her. Or the children. Carla wrapped her arms around herself. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. But I love you, Vinny. We can fix this. We can. No. The word came out quiet, final. We can't. She looked up at him, mascara streaking. Please, don't do this. Vinny reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the coffee table. Inside is enough to start over. A new city. A new life. No strings. No contact. You sign the papers my lawyer will bring tomorrow and you disappear. Carla stared at the envelope. You're divorcing me. You were never my wife in any way that mattered. Vinny's voice cracked for the first time. You were never family. Carla began to sob, deep, wrenching sounds that filled the too-perfect room. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought she'd just leave. You thought she was nothing. Vinny's hands clenched at his sides. You thought she was disposable. Like the people you stepped over every day while you spent what I sent to keep her warm. He turned away, unable to look at her tears any longer. Not because he pitied her. Because the sight made him sick with the memory of Maria's hollow cheeks, of Lily's too quiet hunger, of Jamal's guarded eyes. I'm donating the house, he said without turning, to a shelter for single mothers and kids. It'll be a place of safety instead of pain. Carla's sobs grew louder. Vinny, please, he walked to the door. Paused. Looked back once. You had everything, he said quietly. And you chose cruelty. Live with that. He stepped outside into the morning light. Tony waited by the SUV. She signed soon. Vinny slid into the driver's seat. Let's go home. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Every block carried memories of empty promises of money, sent instead of presents of trust misplaced. When he pulled into the driveway of the colonial house, the porch light was still on, soft and welcoming. Maria waited at the door. Barefoot, hair loose, eyes searching his face the moment he stepped inside. Vinny closed the door behind him, locked it, leaned against it for a second, breathing. Maria crossed the foyer slowly. Is it done? He nodded. She's gone. The house will be something better. Maria reached him then, placed both hands on his chest, careful of the bandage, and looked up at him with those dark, steady eyes that had seen too much suffering and still chose kindness. You didn't have to give it away, she whispered. I wanted to. Vinny covered her hands with his. I want every part of my life to be clean for you. For them. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Dad. He opened his arms. She ran down, threw herself against him. He lifted her carefully, mindful of his ribs, and held her close. Jamal followed more slowly, stopped a few feet away. Vinny met his gaze over Lily's head. It's over. No more bricks, no more cars, just us. Jamal swallowed. Then slowly he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around both of them. A small, awkward hug that meant everything. Maria joined them. 4 people standing in the foyer, holding each other in the soft morning light. Vinny closed his eyes. The man who had once ruled through fear now stood surrounded by the only power that mattered, love that refused to break. Outside the city woke sirens, distant traffic, beginning its slow roar. Inside, a family began to heal. Quietly, completely, irreversibly. The first week of November in 2025 arrived quietly in Chicago, carrying the sharp bite of coming winter. Frost traced delicate patterns on the windows of the colonial house each morning, but inside the rooms stayed warm, too warm sometimes, as though the furnace itself understood the family living there had spent too many years being cold. Maria Gonzalez had begun to fill out just a little. Her cheeks held the faintest hint of color, her steps less tentative on the hardwood floors. She moved through the kitchen now with something resembling confidence, opening cabinets without hesitation, running her fingers along the smooth handles of real silverware, allowing herself small luxuries like brewing coffee in the expensive machine Vinny had never used until now. Lily and Jamal had claimed the upstairs bedrooms as their own. Drawings taped to walls, new books stacked on nightstands, a baseball bat leaning in the corner of Jamal's room like a quiet promise of spring games yet to come. The house smelled of cinnamon toast in the mornings, of laundry detergent, in the afternoons of the lavender candle Maria lit each evening because the scent reminded her of something clean and unbroken. Vincent Russo watched all of it from the edges of rooms, from doorways, from the quiet of the back porch when everyone else slept. He had not returned to any of the old meeting places, had not answered the burner phones that still vibrated in the glove compartment of the SUV. He told himself he was done. He told his men he was done. Most believed him. A few did not. That Tuesday evening the sky hung low and slate gray. Vinny stood in the study once, a rarely used room now scattered with Lily's schoolbooks and Jamal's baseball cards, staring at the small safe built into the wall behind a framed photograph of Lake Michigan at sunrise. Inside the safe lay the last of the cash reserves he kept for emergencies, along with documents he had hoped never to need again. Titles, passports, clean identities for 4 people. He had been meaning to move them to a safer location for days. Something instinct perhaps had kept him from it. The doorbell rang. Vinny tensed. No one came to this house unannounced. Tony was stationed 2 blocks away in an unmarked car. Any visitor would have been vetted first. He moved through the hallway silently. Maria appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Expecting someone, she asked softly. "No." Vinny's voice stayed low. "Take the kids upstairs. Now." Maria's face paled, but she nodded once and disappeared up the stairs without another word. Vinny waited until he heard the soft click of the children's bedroom door closing, before he opened the front door. Marco stood on the porch. Tall, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair cropped close. Marco had been with Vinny since they were 20 through bad deals, worse nights, blood on both their hands. The man who had once taken a bullet meant for Vinny now wore a calm, almost regretful expression. "Boss," Marco said quietly, "we need to talk." Vinny stepped aside. Inside. They moved to the study. Marco closed the door behind them without being asked. Vinny did not sit. "Speak." Marco exhaled slowly. "You're out. I get it. The kids, the woman, Maria. You're building something different. I respect that. But the family doesn't. They see weakness. They see opportunity." Vinny's jaw tightened. "The family can go to hell." Marco's eyes flickered with something close to pain. "They already have plans. They're moving on you. Tonight. Not just intimidation. Real pressure. They want the territory, the accounts, everything. And they're willing to go through the house to get it." Vinny felt ice slide down his spine. "You came to warn me." Marco looked away. "I came to tell you to run. Take them and disappear. I can buy you 24 hours. Maybe 36. Vinny studied the man who had stood beside him for 2 decades. Something in Marco's posture, the slight hunch of the shoulders, the way his right hand stayed near his coat pocket, felt wrong. "You're lying," Vinny said quietly. Marco's head snapped up. "Vinny, you're not warning me." Vinny stepped closer. "You're stalling me." Marco's hand moved fast, practiced. The pistol cleared leather before Vinny could close the distance, the barrel leveled at Vinny's chest. "Don't," Marco said, voice cracking. "Just don't make this harder." Vinny did not flinch. How long? Marco's eyes glistened. "Since last spring, Carla came to me first. Said you were changing, said the kids made you soft. Said if we moved now while you were distracted, we could split everything clean." The crew backed her. They're outside now. Waiting. Vinny felt the world tilt. Not from the gun, from the betrayal itself. Marco, the man who had carried him out of a burning warehouse in Detroit, who had sat with him in hospital waiting rooms after his mother died, who had promised once drunk and sincere that they were brothers, was pointing a gun at him in the house where his daughter slept. The pain was deeper than any bullet could reach. "Why?" Vinny asked, voice raw. Marco's hand trembled. "Because you were leaving. You were walking away from everything we built. And I couldn't. This life is all I know. If you walk, what happens to me, to the others?" Vinny took one slow step forward. "You could have walked with me." Marco laughed, bitter, broken. "And do what? Be a family man? I don't know how to be that. I never did." Vinny's voice dropped. "You're pointing a gun at my daughter's house." Marco's eyes filled. "I know." Silence stretched thick, unbearable. Then Marco lowered the pistol. Just an inch. Vinny moved faster than pain should have allowed. He closed the distance, knocked the gun aside, slammed Marco against the wall. The pistol clattered to the floor. Vinny's forearm pressed against Marco's throat, not choking, just holding. "You don't get to cry about this," Vinny said, voice shaking with fury and grief. "You don't get to feel sorry for yourself. You chose them over us, over her, over Lily." Marco's tears fell freely now. "I didn't want to hurt the girl. I swear. I thought if we scared you enough, you'd come back. Be the old Vinny, the one who didn't hesitate." Vinny leaned closer. "That Vinny is dead." He released Marco, stepped back, picked up the fallen pistol, and ejected the magazine. Bullets scattered across the rug like brass rain. Marco slid down the wall until he sat on the floor. "They're coming. 5 minutes. Maybe less." Vinny looked at him, really looked, and saw only a broken man who had once been his brother. "Get out," Vinny said quietly. "Go through the back. Disappear. If I ever see you again, I won't hesitate." Marco stared up at him. "Vinny, go." Marco rose slowly, legs unsteady. He walked to the study door, paused with his hand on the knob. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Vinny did not answer. Marco left. Vinny stood alone in the study for a long moment. The room felt colder than the shed on 63rd ever had. He moved to the window, looked out. 3 cars had pulled up, quiet, no headlights. Men stepping out, familiar faces. Men he had once trusted with his life. He turned toward the stairs. Maria waited at the top, Lily and Jamal behind her. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. Vinny climbed the steps slowly. When he reached them, he pulled all 3 into his arms, careful of his stitches, careful of their fragility. "They're here," he said softly, "but they won't touch you." Maria's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Vinny looked down at Lily, his daughter, then at Jamal, then at Maria, the woman who had kept hope alive when everything else had died. "We fight," he said. "Not with guns. With everything I should have used years ago." He led them into the master bedroom, locked the door, moved a heavy dresser in front of it. Then he knelt in front of the children. "I need you to be brave," he told them. "Hide in the closet. Stay quiet. No matter what you hear." Lily's lip quivered. "Dad, I'm coming back," he said fiercely. "I swear." Jamal nodded once, small, determined. Vinny kissed Lily's forehead, then Jamal's. Then stood and faced Maria. She stepped into his arms without hesitation. Held him so tightly he felt her heartbeat against his chest. "Don't die," she whispered. Vinny pressed his lips to her hair. "I won't." He stepped back, took one last look at the 3 people who had become his entire world. Then he walked downstairs alone toward the men who had come to take it away. The front door opened before he reached it. Marco stood there again, bleeding from the mouth, eyes wild. "They're coming through the back too," he gasped. "I tried to stop them." Vinny grabbed him by the collar. "Get upstairs. Protect them." Marco stared at him, shock, gratitude, shame all at once. Vinny shoved him toward the stairs. "Go," Marco ran. Vinny turned to face the front door. It burst open. 3 men stepped inside, guns drawn. Vinny raised both hands slowly. "Let's talk," he said. But inside his chest the storm raged fiercer than ever. Betrayal had cut deeper than any rival ever could, and now it stood in his home, threatening everything he loved. He would burn it all down before he let them win. Rain returned with violence just after midnight, on the last night of October, in 2025, hammering the roof of the colonial house like fists demanding entry. Inside the hallway, light burned low and steady, casting long shadows across the floorboards. Vincent Russo stood at the top of the stairs, back pressed to the wall, listening to the muffled sounds below, boots on hardwood, low voices, the occasional creak of furniture being shifted. His ribs throbbed beneath the fresh bandage, each breath pulling at the stitches like wire, but the pain felt distant compared to the storm inside his chest. Marco had gone upstairs minutes earlier, silent, head bowed, carrying the pistol. Vinny had handed him with one whispered instruction: "If they get past me, you protect them." No hesitation. Marco had only nodded, eyes wet, unable to meet Vinny's gaze. Now the man who had betrayed him stood guard over the 3 people Vinny would die for. Vinny descended one slow step at a time, bare feet silent on the carpet runner. The pistol he had taken from the study felt heavy in his hand, not because of its weight, but because of what using it would mean. He had sworn to leave this life behind. He had sworn to Lily, to Maria, to Jamal, yet here he was again, descending into darkness to meet violence with violence. The living room came into view. 4 men waited there, faces he recognized from years of shared deals and shared silences. They had not drawn weapons yet, not openly, but their coats hung open, hands resting near hips in that practiced way that said they were ready. The tallest, Eddie Red Callahan, stepped forward when he saw Vinny. Rain dripped from his coat onto the rug Maria had so carefully vacuumed that afternoon. "Vinny," Eddie said, voice almost gentle. "We don't want blood. Not tonight. Just a conversation." Vinny stopped at the bottom step. "You broke into my house at midnight. That's not conversation." Eddie spread his hands. "You've been dodging calls. Marco said you're done. We needed to see for ourselves." Vinny's grip tightened on the pistol, still at his side barrel down. "You've seen. Now leave." Eddie's eyes flicked toward the stairs. "Nice setup you got here. Kids? A woman who looks at you like you hung the moon. Must be nice. Must make a man soft." Vinny felt the old rage rise hot, familiar but beneath it something colder, sharper terror. Not for himself. For them. For Lily's soft breathing upstairs, for Jamal's guarded trust, for Maria's fragile hope that safety could last. "I'm not soft," Vinny said quietly. "I'm finished. There's a difference." Eddie smiled, thin, pitying. "The outfit doesn't do finished. You know that. You either run it or it runs you." Vinny took one step forward. "Then run me." Eddie's smile faded. He nodded to the man on his left. The second man moved fast, practiced drawing a pistol from beneath his coat. Vinny raised his own weapon in the same heartbeat. But before either could fire, a small sound came from the stairs. A gasp. Lily stood at the top, landing barefoot nightgown too big, eyes wide with horror. Behind her, Maria reached desperately for the girl's arm, whispering frantically, "Lily, no." Time slowed. The man with the drawn pistol swung toward the sound, instinct, not thought. Vinny saw the barrel rise toward the stairs, toward his daughter. He moved without conscious decision, body launching forward, arms outstretched, placing himself between the gun and the landing. The shot cracked sharp, deafening in the enclosed space. Pain bloomed in Vinny's shoulder, hot blinding. He staggered but did not fall. His own pistol came up. He fired once high into the ceiling, enough to make the intruders flinch, scatter toward cover. "Run," he shouted upward. Hyde Maria dragged Lily back, Jamal, appearing suddenly to help pull her away. Doors slammed upstairs. Eddie cursed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Vinny pressed his free hand to his shoulder. Blood soaked through his fingers, warm and steady. He tasted copper on his tongue. "You came for me," he said, voice rough with pain. "You got me. Now go." Eddie hesitated, looked at the blood, looked at the stairs where a child's cry had just been silenced by a desperate hand. Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or shame. Then he nodded once. "Tell Marco we'll be in touch." The 4 men backed toward the door, slow weapons still raised. Rain rushed in when they opened it. Then they were gone. Vinny stood alone in the foyer. He waited until the sound of engines faded before allowing his knees to buckle. He slid down the wall, blood smearing the paint behind him. The pistol clattered to the floor. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Maria reached him first, dropping to her knees, hands flying to his shoulder, pressing desperately against the wound. Vincent, oh God, Lily appeared behind her face, white eyes enormous. Jamal stood frozen on the last step, staring at the blood. Vinny tried to speak. "I'm okay. Just stay back." Maria's hands shook so violently she could barely keep pressure on the wound. Tears streamed down her face. "You're not okay. You're bleeding." Vinny lifted his good hand, brushed her cheek. "I'm here. I'm still here." Lily rushed forward, small hands hovering, afraid to touch. "Dad, you said you'd come back." Vinny looked at her, his daughter, and felt something inside him fracture completely. "I did," he whispered. "I always will." Jamal finally moved, dropping beside Maria, tearing off his own t-shirt, pressing it against the wound with her. "You're an idiot," the boy muttered, voice cracking. "You didn't have to do that." Vinny managed a weak smile. "Yeah, I did." Maria's sobs grew louder, deep, wrenching sounds that tore at Vinny worse than the bullet ever could. "You promised," she choked out. "You promised no more blood. No more nights wondering if you'd come home." Vinny reached for her face again, weakly trembling. "I know. I'm sorry." She pressed her forehead to his. "Don't be sorry. Just don't leave us." Vinny closed his eyes. Rain drummed against the windows. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police, or perhaps Tony had finally intervened. He felt Lily's small hand slip into his, felt Jamal's steady pressure on the wound, felt Maria's tears fall onto his chest. And in that moment, bleeding on the floor of a house he had bought to keep safe, the last of his old life shattered. No more territory. No more power plays. No more running from what mattered. Only this. Only them. He opened his eyes, looked at each of them, his daughter, the boy who had become his son in every way that counted, the woman who had kept hope alive through years of cold and hunger. "I'm done," he whispered. "I swear it. No more outfit. No more meetings. No more guns. Just us." Maria's breath hitched. "You mean it," Vinny nodded, slow, painful. "I mean it. If I live through this, we leave. A new city, a new house, a new life. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." Lily leaned closer. "With a yard for a dog," Vinny laughed, weak, ragged. "With a yard, and a dog, and baseball games, and everything you want." Jamal's voice was small. "You'll stay." Vinny looked at him, really looked. "Always." Maria pressed her lips to his forehead, soft, trembling. "Then live," she whispered. "Live for us." Vinny closed his eyes again. The sirens grew louder. Help was coming. But the real help, the real healing had already arrived. In the small, fierce hands holding him. In the tears that fell without shame. In the love that refused to let go. Vincent Russo, the man who had once ruled through fear, lay bleeding on his own floor, surrounded by the only power that had ever truly mattered, and for the first time in his life he was not afraid. He was home. The first snow of the season fell softly on Chicago in early November 2025, blanketing the city in quiet white. Inside the colonial house, however, warmth had become more than temperature. It had become memory, promise, and finally permanence. The stitches in Vincent Russo's shoulder had healed into a thin pink line, a scar he no longer hid beneath long sleeves. He wore it openly now, the way a man wears proof that he once almost lost everything and chose to keep fighting for what remained. Maria Gonzalez stood at the kitchen window, watching flakes drift past the glass. She wore a soft green sweater Vinny had bought her the week before, cashmere impossibly light against skin that had once known only threadbare denim and wind that cut like knives. Her body still carried echoes of the old hunger wrists, delicate as bird bones, collar bones that rose sharply when she breathed deeply. Yet color had returned to her cheeks, and when she smiled now, the expression reached her eyes instead of stopping at the surface. Vinny entered quietly behind her. He moved more slowly these days, not from pain but from reverence. Every step in this house felt like walking on holy ground. Maria turned. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "The snow, like the world decided to start over." Vinny stepped closer, stopped just behind her. "It does that sometimes." She leaned back against his chest. He wrapped his good arm around her waist, gentle, careful, as though she might vanish if he held too tightly. They stood like that for a long time, watching white cover the lawn, the driveway, the street where headlights no longer slowed to watch. Upstairs, Lily and Jamal were packing. Not fleeing, packing for a move they had chosen together. Vinny had made the decision the night after the shooting, while Maria cleaned blood from the foyer floor, and Jamal sat silently beside Lily until she fell asleep. Vinny had sat alone in the study and written one sentence on a single sheet of paper: "I quit." He had called no one, sent no message. Simply walked into the old neighborhood the next morning, still bandaged, still limping slightly, and handed the note to the first man he saw, who still wore the old colors. No explanation, no threat, just the truth. The outfit had not taken it well. 2 days later, 3 men waited for him outside a corner store near the old 2-flat. They stepped into his path, coats open, hands visible, voices low. "Boss wants to know if you're serious," the leader said. Vinny looked at each of them, men he had once trusted, men he had once led. "I'm serious," he answered. They exchanged glances. One laughed nervously. "You walk away, someone else takes your place. You know how this works." Vinny stepped closer. "Then let them take it. I'm done." The laughter died. The leader studied him for a long moment. "You're throwing away everything." Vinny's voice stayed calm. "I'm keeping the only thing that ever mattered." They let him pass. No shots, no threats, just silence. That silence followed him home. Now 3 weeks later, the house stood half-empty boxes, labeled in Lily's careful handwriting, stacked near the front door. A moving van waited in the driveway, engine idling. Vinny walked upstairs. Lily sat on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, deciding which ones to take. She looked up when he entered. "Can we bring the bear with the one eye?" Vinny knelt beside her. "We can bring everything." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I'm scared." He held her close. "I know, but we're going together." Jamal appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "The van guy says we leave in 20 minutes. Vinny looked at him. You ready? Jamal shrugged, small-guarded. Never been anywhere else. Vinny stood, walked over, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You'll like it. There's a yard. A school with a real baseball field. And no one will ever tell you to hide again. Jamal's throat worked. You promise? Vinny met his eyes. I promise. Downstairs, Maria waited near the front door. She held the small American flag pin Lily had given Vinny weeks earlier, still chipped, still precious. Vinny took it from her fingers, pinned it to his jacket. Maria's voice trembled. I never thought I'd leave Chicago. Vinny cupped her face. We're not leaving home. We're taking it with us. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was so afraid, for so long. Afraid the cold would never end. Afraid no one would ever stay. Vinny brushed the tears away. I'm staying. Forever. She rose on her toes, kissed his cheek, soft, lingering. Then she turned to the children. Come on, sweethearts. New beginning. They walked out together, 4 people carrying boxes, carrying scars, carrying hope. The moving van pulled away slowly. Behind it, the colonial house stood quiet, already someone else's. Vinny drove the SUV behind the van, Maria, beside him Lily and Jamal in the back seat, watching the city disappear in the rearview mirror. No one spoke for a long time. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence. Dad, yeah, sweetheart, are we going to be okay? Vinny reached back, squeezed her hand. We're already okay. They drove north past the old neighborhood, past the vacant lot on 63rd, where a shed had once stood past every corner, where hunger and cold had once ruled. Hours later, they crossed into Wisconsin. Snow fell thicker here, softer. A small town appeared, white houses, a school with a bright red sign, a park with a frozen pond. Vinny pulled into the driveway of a 2-story house with a wide porch, and a yard big enough for a dog and baseball games. Real estate papers waited inside, signed, paid in full, no mortgage, no questions. They stepped out into falling snow. Lily laughed pure, bright sound and ran toward the porch. Jamal followed more slowly, but his steps quickened when he saw the basketball hoop mounted above the garage. Maria stood beside Vinny, watching the children. She slipped her hand into his. Thank you, she whispered. Vinny looked down at her thin, beautiful, unbreakable. Thank you, he answered, for teaching me what family means. They walked up the steps together. Inside the house smelled of new wood and possibility. Vinny closed the door behind them. Outside snow continued to fall, covering tracks, covering pain, covering the past. Inside, 4 people began again. Not perfectly, not without scars, but together, and that was enough. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. From this tale, we can draw many knowledge about the power of compassion, the true meaning of knowledge in human connections, the lesson that love sees no color of skin, the lesson that wealth cannot buy what poverty sometimes teaches best, resilience and heart, another lesson in forgiveness, yet another. Lesson in choosing people over power, the education of protecting the vulnerable, the education that real strength lies in vulnerability, the education of second chances, another education in letting go of old ways, and finally the education that family is built, not inherited. I wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We upload engaging stories every day, stories that remind us what really matters. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Share your thoughts, your emotions. I read every comment and it means so much to hear from deep within your hearts. Thank you for being here. Goodbye for now, and I promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.